Hey, it's Rod Yates. Welcome to Mastering Events, an Audience Republic podcast. Each episode, I'll be talking to some of the world's most accomplished event professionals to discover how they got where they are today, the lessons they've learned throughout that journey, and their insights around event marketing and maximizing ticket sales. My guest today is Josh Walker, co-founder and CEO at Sports Innovation Lab. So Sports Innovation Lab is a data company that's revolutionizing the way sports organizations use data to understand their customers and acquire their future fan. By analyzing fan behavior at scale, they use that intelligence to help organizations drive live viewership, increase conversion rates, and build more meaningful sponsorships. Not surprisingly, we talk a lot about data in this interview and the most impactful ways that brands and leagues can use it. We also look at some of the parallels between the music and sports industries in terms of ticket buying behavior, the increasing importance of OTT platforms in the sporting space, the concept of the fluid fan, and much more. But we started by talking about the first major sporting event that Josh ever attended.
My major first event was when my dad took me to a Yankees game when I was a kid, and the thing that was most memorable about it was that he bought really bad seats, so we were like way up high, and I had to use binoculars to see my favorite players. But he bought me a jersey with my favorite player's number on the back, and people in Boston hate this guy, so I can't tell this story in certain crowds, but it's Bucky Dent, and his number was 20. And I was leaving the stadium with my dad, and I remember, and I was probably 7 years old or so. Somebody said to me, "Hey, are you Bucky Dent?" And I thought for a hot minute, like maybe I was. And so, yeah, I have that great memory of doing that with my dad.
I love that. So was sport important to you growing up?
Oh, without a doubt. I'm a very strong believer that sports is one of the greatest avenues for kids to understand who they are, to experience confidence, to gain physical activity, to do all those things. And in my life, it was instrumental for me figuring out who I was and how much I enjoyed being a leader on the field. And that translated directly, obviously, into my college and high school and, into my professional career. It's always about just getting a group of people together, sharing a common goal, operating like a team, being selfless. Sports teaches you all those things.
And so was it quite early on that you thought you need to have a career in sports in some area?
That's an interesting question because, like, yes, I wanted to work in sports leaving college. I did some writing in college for the college newspaper. We had a sports article, my best friend and I. It was called Head to Head or Face Off or something like that. And he would write one point of view and I would write the other point of view. And I graduated and wanted to be a sports writer. This was back when newspapers were still a thing. And I couldn't make any money doing it. So I went into technology, and it was around the time that the internet took off. And I kind of put my sports career and those ambitions on hold, and maybe didn't even think that I would revisit them. But when I had kids, I got really interested in watching sports with my children, using sports to teach them math and things about like what was happening in the world and other countries and other cultures. And it became an avenue for me to have a different kind of conversation with my children and still do something I enjoyed. So that brought me back full circle to my passion, and that's where we really started the idea for Sports Innovation Lab.
So you saw an opportunity for data to be used in sports to provide insights for leagues and for organizations. Were they the dots that you joined?
It wasn't the most direct connection to data right away. It was really about me trying to teach kids math using sports. So I was sitting there with my child and I was trying to teach him like how many yards somebody had to throw to reach 300, or what was the score, teaching them numbers and teaching them statistics and just getting them to use their brains while we were sitting there enjoying a game that I wanted to watch. It was really the way that I got to meet my co-founders. And the way that I met my co-founders was through this project of trying to teach my kids math using sports. And what they said to me, because one of them was a professional football player, played in the NFL. The other one is Angela Ruggiero, who's my co-founder and really the face of the business for the last 7 years. Angela is one of the only women in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And she said to me, "Look, you understand something about this industry that like most people don't, which is how to use data." And she sat on all these boards, and she was on the IOC, and she was chief strategy officer of the LA 24 Olympics. So she was making very big decisions in the boardroom with a lot of other people, and they were using their gut and not data to make those decisions. So we really started to think about what was the industry missing, why were they making some of these decisions, how was money being moved around. And what we identified better than probably most other companies out there is that we needed to bring data to sports. You couldn't go into sports and use everybody's data because they didn't have a lot of it. And I think that's the thing that surprises people about sports, which is that you think about the sex and the glitter and the glam of professional sports. You think, oh, they're probably cutting edge technology companies, and they're not. They tend to be a little bit more on the laggard side of things. And when you look into their databases, they don't know a lot about who their customer is. And I knew that from my years of experience working in technology, that if you went into these companies and you tried to aggregate all their data, you'd spend years doing it. And so instead of trying to build them a CRM system, we actually go out, collect our own data, license our own data, partner to get data, and we bring those insights to them. And once you can show them more about their fans, then that unlocks the second part of our business, which is helping them reach those people. And that's what we're doing when we develop marketing audiences so they can go after the exact people they want to reach.
Well, I mean, that's fascinating. And I want to talk to you about your insights into those marketing methods. But just out of interest, why do you think there was that? Why do you think sports organizations were so behind the eight ball in terms of using data?
I think the simple answer is that they've been run like billionaire hobbies. Like most of the people who own sports teams, even if they're very successful in their own businesses, they haven't treated their teams and their leagues like they would their own technology companies, their own finance companies, their own healthcare companies. So they haven't translated that industry success into the area of sports. They like the sports, property. They like having the front row seats. They like the TV deals and all the things that come with it. They love the player stuff. It's like but it never really became like a business. And now what you see happening, which is really innovative and new for this industry, is private equity is coming in and they're really demanding that there's a much more rigorous approach to running these businesses, justifying these valuations. And that's the turning tide that we see, that really is propelling Sports Innovation Lab forward.
When you started looking at the data and then showing it to some of the organizations you were working with, what were some of the revelations for them and for you just about their fans and fan experience?
One, that they're not all the same. I think that the old cliche that dad was a Yankees fan, so the kid will be a Yankees fan, and then his kids will be Yankees fans. That generational fandom was going away. So our company makes a very big deal about this concept of the fluid fan, which is in almost direct opposition to the concept of a diehard fan. So the diehard fan is somebody who comes whether you win or lose. Dad was a Yankees fan, you're a Yankees fan. Mom was a Yankees fan, you're a Yankees fan. Whatever it was like this given that you were going to root for your local team. You were going to buy those tickets. It was the only show in town. It was the only thing on network television. You were a fan. And the bigger markets benefited from that. The smaller markets struggled, but like you were always going to be a fan. And now you see Wrexham and you see all these other things where it's like, no, fans move around. And they can become fans of international teams. They can become fans of local teams. And that's because of technology. So technology is at the core of the definition of a fluid fan. And we call fluid fans fluid because they have technology at their disposal to be open to change, empowered to choose, and then continuously evolving. Because you just saw the new Apple headset. Like every new innovation that comes out will change the way that fans interact with your content, with your brand, and with your media.
So that provides some big opportunities, I imagine, but also some major challenges for teams who want to engender that loyalty in their fans, that generational loyalty, that want to sell season tickets and even single game tickets. What do you think are the biggest challenges the fluid fans present to leagues and to brands, and who do you see navigating those challenges really well?
Well, unfortunately, there was a global pandemic that can answer that question more directly than I can, which was when COVID hit.
Right.
That was when they realized they can't sell something to their fans if they don't have the data. And it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but it's really about the idea that like if you don't know who your fan is, and if you don't have data on how they behave, and if you can't segment them by their behavior and understand who's valuable, who's loyal, who's a parent, who's a college kid. Like those details aren't in their CRM system most of the time. It's usually some concession data, usually some ticketing data. If they're lucky, maybe they have some merchandise data in there, but they really don't know where else they shop, what other brands they spend their money with, if they over index on sports betting, or if they buy merchandise or collectibles. That's the kind of stuff we're looking for so that we can go in and we can say, you've got a portion of your customer base that looks like this, another portion that looks like this, and another portion that looks like this. And that really became obvious during the pandemic because they really couldn't reach or communicate with their customers when the sports were turned off.
So once a team has that data that you've provided them with, what are the best practices for using it?
It really is this concept of insights to activation. Insights on the side of trying to figure out who your fans are so that you can talk to your sponsors. Hey, we're talking to you because you're the favorite QSR restaurant for our fans. They love Chipotle more than Taco Bell. Hey, they tend to use State Farm instead of, some other insurance company. Hey, they tend to buy Nike instead of Adidas. That gives your sponsorship team a way to engage brands without trying to say, hey, we've got a sign in left field. Do you want to buy it? You're talking to them in a language that says, hey, our customers have an affinity with you already. That's the insights part of our business. The activation part of our business, the best practices are when we're working with a group like Monumental, very tech forward ownership group. Ted Leonsis owns the business. His son, Zach, is very tech forward. They're building a new stadium. They own the Wizards and the Capitals and some other properties on the esports side. They have to really cross market to a whole area of DC in America, but they also have to reach the suburbs in Virginia. And the people that are in Virginia tend to be hunters, outdoorsmen, that kind of like hockey parent. And the people that are in the city tend to be commuters, tend to be more basketball fans, tend to be daters and younger people. Those insights that they get now allow them to reach those people with different marketing messages and create different experiences for them. That's the best practice of using data. It's really translating data into your marketing, but also into your game day experience so that when you have a date night, you reached the daters to sell them the tickets. They came and they had an amazing time, and they're going to bring their next boyfriend or girlfriend to the game because that was an amazing, night out. You see the Marlins did this great thing where they did a pet night. I've never been in a stadium with that many dogs before, but everybody got the memo and they all showed up with their dogs. I don't know who cleaned the stadium, but it was like a really good idea to bring them in. Then they had the pet cam up on the Jumbotron, and they should have, I didn't see it, but they should have had pet food, Chewy, some sort of pets, brand sponsoring the whole thing. That's the integration of this data that allows you to sort of talk to the market in a different way and talk to your customers in a way that resonates with what their passions are.
And do you know what are the best ways of interacting with, say, someone from Virginia, the hunter from Virginia, versus that younger person in a more metropolitan area that you mentioned? When you think about things like social media channels or direct to fan marketing via email, SMS, do certain techniques tend to resonate more with either of those segments that you just mentioned?
It's a great question, but a good marketer tests and learns, right? Like there's no dominant channel. If you take the concept of a fluid fan, they're on an OTT streaming platform, they're on their phone, they're on linear television, they're on a podcast, they're everywhere. So what you really need to do is be using these audiences to do a mixed method approach to really figuring out where am I getting the best reaction to this audience and where do I heavy up my media? And then you have to optimize for that. You can't just like do it once and be like, that worked really well, or that worked really badly. We should never do that again. You may have hit them at the right place at the right time, but you had the wrong message. And so it's about a test and learn approach that, again, e-commerce, retail, CPG, finance, healthcare, they've been perfecting this over years. There's that narrative that, caused some trouble for a pharmacy company in the US because they knew the customer was pregnant before they did, because they saw the predictive purchasing pattern of what they were buying from the pharmacy. That's not necessarily spooky as much as it is common sense. If you're buying certain things, you're predisposed to buy other things. So if you bought a NASCAR ticket in the past, there's a high propensity to buy a NASCAR ticket in the future. And that's different than watching highlights. That's different than listening to a podcast. It's a purchase intent that allows you to really understand why our audiences tend to work better than others.
Right. And so with the fluid fan who's consuming this information and this content in all different places, for you trying to gather data on them, like what are the most effective ways for teams to gather data on their fans? Obviously, there's a ticket flow purchase where they might get some basic information, age, location, etc. But in terms of that extra data that you were talking about, purchasing habits and all of that sort of area, how are you seeing the best operators get that data
Well, I mean, it's a
beyond just
very
getting it from you?
well, I was going to say the self serving answer is we knew they were going to struggle to get it, so we licensed it. We're a venture backed company, so we have a little bit more capital to make the investments in the infrastructure that they don't. It would never be logical for one team to go out and make the same investment we've made in this data. We get access to over 50 million US consumers. We get years of that data and we're analyzing that data. That allows us to see patterns that they'll never see. So even if they have the savviest mobile strategy or the savviest OTT strategy or even the best, integration with their sports betting app, they're only going to get a small segment of the population that they're going after. You really need to have a third party that has great first party data to come to the table and help you out. Again, that's the core philosophy of our business. If we went in and worked with their data, we would be dealing with subpar information to try to figure out who these customers are. So we really try to come to them with a much broader data set. And now we're bringing in additional partners into that data set: youth sports companies, sports betting companies, fantasy sports companies, equipment companies, so that we can give them even more information about who these customers are. That is a specialization. And it's a specialization that it's really hard for a sports organization to do because they're really running very lean on the analytics side of the house.
Right. And the concept, just talk about the fluid fan again. Do you find that's across the sporting spectrum? Is it more prevalent in certain sports, or is it more prevalent geographically in terms of globally? Or do you think the fluid fan is just across the board?
No, we get a lot of pushback when we talk to European sporting organizations who believe that their fans are less fluid, that there's a stronger regional and almost cult sort of feeling around the soccer clubs or the rugby clubs and things like that. And my assumption is that that's probably true. That there is a little bit more of a generational thing that's going on in some of those areas where the teams are 100 years old, 200 years old. I get that. But certainly in the US, I think it's across the board. I think when you look at women's sports, when you look at pickleball and cornhole and, even rugby coming to the US, cricket coming to the US, I think there's an appetite for new types of sports that people are just curious to watch. They're like, what is this highlight thing? Or, I never knew that lacrosse was on this, channel at this time. And whoa, this is a really cool game. And so I think the fans are discovering content in new ways, and that increases their fluidity. And again, the core part of the definition is that they're open to change. If they see something that interests them and they're excited, or they see an athlete on social media that they're like, wow, this guy's amazing. The way he trains is phenomenal. Or this woman is unbelievably talented. I can't believe how many backflips she can do. They're going to tune in. And I think that that's capturing a whole new audience for these sports that traditionally would struggle to reach an audience that they could get to tune in.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned rugby and cricket. Rugby league is a very big sport in Australia, and this season coming, as we head into the winter down here in the Southern Hemisphere, they're actually launching the rugby league season in Las Vegas. So they're putting on a couple of shows there. So there is a real attempt to move into the US market, and I know the same is happening with cricket as well. It just strikes me as such a difficult market to crack into.
Let me tell you how they're trying to do it,
Right.
because World Rugby is one of our clients. And instead of coming to us and saying, hey, try to scrounge up as many rugby fans as you can and help us target them, they were very purposeful when they were coming to the US. They're launching the Rugby Sevens in LA. This will be the second year that I think they've done it. And you're right, there's the whole tournament in Vegas as well. But what they're doing is they're looking for what they call like these lifestyle or entertainment seekers. So they're not saying, I want a rugby fan. I want somebody who's like open to something new. and wants to come to a festival like atmosphere where there's a concert and food trucks and really great entertainment, and it's going to span a few days, and they're going to get to tailgate and hang out, and there'll be some participatory sort of activations. And so they wanted to find people in the LA market and people that were predisposed to travel to be like, yo, there's this event going on. Do you want to be part of it? And then talking to them in a language that's not like, hey, come see this rugby head to head competition. They're like, hey, come have a great weekend out. And this could be really fun. And that's, I think, a really smart way for any new property, even an international property that's well established, to build their fan base here in the US.
That's really interesting because I think that World Rugby is rugby union. Rugby league is slightly different, and I've seen some of their advertising campaigns in the US. They have Russell Crowe narrating it because Russell Crowe owns one of the Sydney teams, and the focus is very much on that head-to-head combat. No pads, no stoppages, brutal contact, which I think is an interesting approach in contrast to what appears to me to be a very smart approach that the rugby union people are taking with that more
I agree.
lifestyle approach.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that that's what I mean when I say you have to test and learn, because I think you're going to find that if you're trying to compare rugby to the NFL or to the UFC, you're going to get one demographic. And if you're trying to really create a family like atmosphere where the kids can come, where there's a concert, where there's food trucks, where there's entertainment, you're going to get a much broader segment of the population.
And that also ties in with what I think we see happening in the music space as well in terms of festivals. The focus is becoming more on the experience, the food offerings that are going to be there, the activations. It's across. That's interesting that there is that parallel.
Yeah, and tie it to the business that you're in, which is like when you think about these venues, they're now becoming mixed use environments. You're going to have a Top Golf, you're going to have bowling, you're going to have a movie theater. You might even have some residential and office space attached to these things. So the idea that you have like this diverse population that's ready to come, not to see the head to head rivalry or competition, but to have a really nice night out, is really where this industry's headed.
That's so interesting. You spoke earlier. Well, obviously, we've been speaking a lot about data, and key to data, using data, is that personalization. How are you seeing like the best teams? Like, what are you seeing? Any other great examples of organizations really personalizing their communications or their offerings to fans?
They tend to be more like promotional in nature. I can't really say that I've seen anything that I could say, hey, this is a best practice. I do like the clubs that do the standing room only or the membership models, which are more like the gym membership, where you can buy a certain number of tickets and you're not a season ticket holder. You're not considered a loyal season, ticket holder or some sort of premium buyer. But there's a lighter touch, lower price point, sort of fluid ability to go to a game when you have time, when you're in town, when you have a night off or something like that. Those membership models, I think, are really smart, especially for the clubs that have flex capacity, right? There are lots of teams that sell out, but there's also, a way to sort of mitigate that like secondary market pricing gouging and things like that, which is this membership model, which I think builds a loyal fan base than sort of any sort of promotional or theme night or something like that.
You mentioned OTT platforms earlier. In terms of, I guess, linear, more traditional platforms, I guess I think I've seen you talk about the fact that those sort of broadcast platforms make it easier for leagues and for teams to attract new fans, whereas the OTT and streaming platforms give existing fans an opportunity to go deeper and to engage more. But the OTT platforms can actually make it harder to find for the casual fan. Are you finding that to be the case? And if so, like, how are you seeing organizations navigate that transition to OTT while still attracting new fans?
It's a wild situation. I'm not a media watcher from the perspective of really digging into viewership numbers or Nielsen stuff or ComScore, but we look at subscriptions to OTT platforms as a way to measure sort of how committed are fans to different platforms. We isolate the ones that only carry sports. So we look at Hulu, we look at ESPN Plus, we look at Fubo, we look at Sling, we look at things that have had Sunday Ticket or have a lot of sports programming connected to it. And we've isolated it on when the seasons start. So we're like, oh, this is a baseball fan, and they over-index on buying baseball stuff. Baseball season has started. Did they switch an OTT platform? I can go into this stuff and I can talk about it for hours, but the point that we found in the data is that your sports passion absolutely impacts your subscription. I can say that without a doubt. And it influences churn, which is the biggest problem for the OTT market. So I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but it's really about sports programming being a very important component to having a successful streaming base of subscribers. That's why you see Netflix, that's why you see Apple, that's why you see Google getting into this and paying up for these rights. Amazon and all the others, they're dabbling in this. It's also why they're doing docuseries and scripted content. There's a lot of things that they need to build around their other programming. Because if you think back to how linear broadcasting worked, the game was supposed to be a lead in to something else. That's why the football games were on before 60 minutes. They wanted the people that were watching the game to stick around and then watch the news program. When you can flip through all these channels on the OTT platform, that lead in is just as important to Netflix and Amazon and Apple as anything else. They want you there because they're collecting data on you and they're learning about your preferences and they're going to recommend other content to you based on what you're watching. So they need this programming. And that's the thing that I think is most interesting in this new world. It's almost like we're reverting back to the bundling, strategy that a lot of these networks had previous to, cable really fragmenting the industry.
So, what are the advantages for teams and for organizations of OTT? Because I imagine Netflix tends not to be overly transparent with their data. So, in terms of this being an opportunity to accumulate data, I don't know, is that an opportunity or is that not an opportunity? Like, what are the benefits for the teams?
In the States, the regional sports networks have struggled. That's probably an understatement. A lot of them have gone bankrupt, and we had this big issue with Diamond Sports having a bankruptcy issue and things like that. So the leagues had to step in. In that case, Major League Baseball had to come in and help stream some of the local games so the fans didn't miss out on an opportunity. For the Major League Baseball, that was an opportunity to collect data on those customers. So when you are the one delivering the content and you're not disintermediated by an OTT platform, that gives you a particular advantage. Now you don't have the scale that they have, so you struggle, but that's what we're seeing. We're seeing like the Chicago Cubs working with Marquee. We're seeing the Wizards and the Capitals. They bought their local RSN and the NBC affiliate. We're seeing a bunch of these groups saying we need to own our own subscription-based service for live games, but also for shoulder content and scripted content and athlete content. And we need to do that because we need to know what our fans are watching and what they're interested in. So the cost of that usually seems lower because you don't have to stand up a linear broadcast network. But I think a lot of people that venture into that find that it's just as hard to provide a quality experience in the digital streaming world.
Absolutely. But I guess the benefits, the data play by itself, once you start using it correctly, that's a huge benefit.
Well, that's why you see the NFL launching NFL Plus. That's why you've seen the NHL move from one platform to another. They're trying to find those partnerships that give them that level of visibility.
I don't know if you can talk to this because I believe that NASCAR are a client of yours. So I'm not sure if you can talk about the way they use data, but I've seen you praise NASCAR for how they use data in very strategic ways. Are you able to talk about some of those ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, NASCAR is a company that I actually got closer to at a tech conference. We both went to Snowflake and I got to meet them there. They were speaking, and it was just one of those things where, I'm a nerd. So when I find somebody else who's a nerd, we can really kind of get into the weeds on like what they're trying to do, how they're trying to model things, how they're trying to think about the future of their data architecture. It was the first time where like I met a data person who had a business mindset and was really trying to think about the future of the infrastructure from a perspective of collecting more data, working with this data and things like that. So NASCAR is a client. We have a number of clients that are smart and engaged, but what they're doing is really, really clever, which is they're thinking about all their different racetracks. And they're like, we don't have any visibility into what's going on at these other racetracks. We only know the ones where we own and operate the ticketing or the event or something of that nature. So can you, Sports Innovation Lab, bring us other insights into who these racing fans are? And we can. And we can show them what brands they buy from and all that other stuff. And now they're using our database on an ongoing basis. They subscribe directly to it. And they're not even relying on us as much for the insights. They're going to model their own insights. And for me, that's huge success. That means that they've built the capabilities to know what they need to look for, and they're modeling it now and using it now to build their own audiences. They're still using our audiences, but they're like, we want to create our own so that we own this in the future. So when we talk to our partners and our sponsors and our media providers, we have a perspective and an informed one on what our fans look like. And I think that's really, really smart. So now we're becoming a supplemental source to what they're doing. And hopefully in a few years, we won't be the primary source. They will have a very large and sophisticated infrastructure to do this stuff themselves.
And so how are you seeing them use that data to enhance the race day experience, for example, to offer personalized offerings?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're there yet. I would say they're in the process now of really thinking about how do they get the right fans to come to their races. So we did a first trial with them around an event in LA. They were able to sell a lot of tickets using the audiences that we built for them. They ran a really good A/B test. They used their own internal data and they used our data, and we were really impressed that the stuff we had built in collaboration with them performed 20 times better than what they were doing internally. Now, that's probably the way most of our tests will go because, again, they're dealing with insufficient information. We have everything else that the customer buys. That's just an advantage that we're always going to have because we see the full picture of who these customers are. But what they'll probably be able to do is append some of the information we have into their own internal records so their CRM gets smarter. And that's where they'll start probably modeling more sophisticated personalization, more game day experience stuff that you're referring to. But I think we're still in that first inning or the first lap, if you will, of what they're really trying to accomplish.
Have you, as a sports fan going to games, have you witnessed any great personalized tactics that have really appealed to you on the game day and that have enhanced your experience?
I haven't. No, I
Right.
don't. I'm really completely underwhelmed with the level of sophistication given the passion that the fan shows up with at the venue. They're still doing the same old, they're still throwing t-shirts into the stands. They're still putting people on the, Jumbotron and kissing each other. There's so much opportunity that is just, really at the fingertips of these organizations that they're missing out on.
That's so surprising from someone who's looking back objectively at this. As you mentioned earlier, people assume that these organizations have that sophistication. So it seems
Well,
like
when have
there's
you
so much
look?
opportunity.
I'll flip it around. When have you gone to a game and gone, "Holy cow! I've never experienced anything like this before." It could be a really cool graphic. I've seen some AR stuff, where they've done like a something flying around the stadium. You hold your phone up and you get to see that. Okay, that's cool. I've seen some really sophisticated lighting and some fan experiences where the fans participate in the direction of media. I've seen some highlights delivered to phones. That's new. I've seen people being able to upgrade their seats in the stadium. Okay, that's cool. But like, when have you gone to a venue recently and been like, oh my God, I've never experienced anything like this before? People who go to the Sphere and people who sit in an immersive theater, like they're coming out going, whoa, that was something I'd never experienced before. But like for
Mhm.
most of us, we go to the game and we're like, if we had good seats, maybe we had a great experience. But if we didn't, we're just watching a game and we're watching it the same way we've been watching it for decades.
And there's no post event follow up from teams?
Very, very rarely have I seen anything other than something directly from a Ticketmaster, an Axis, a StubHub or a SeatGeek, which is just another pretty standard formed email that clearly knows that I bought something and now they're trying to sell me something else. So I think it's very unsophisticated email marketing and marketing automation systems that are in place that haven't yet hit the level that other industries have. When I buy a shirt from my online retailer, they know my size, they know the colors I like, they know where I live, they know that I haven't bought a shirt in 6 months and it's probably time because this one's running threadbare. Like there's sophistication in that thinking and that marketing that sports has not yet really achieved.
Okay. One of the things that you see has been quite prevalent in the music space, particularly post COVID, is late ticket buying. That's been one of the big trends. What trends are you seeing across sports in terms of fan trends when it comes to things like buying tickets?
Well, I do think it is the late buying that you're referencing that I think is, we have Game Time and we have some other sites that have made it easy for people to at the very last moment get the prices of the excess inventory that's available. I'm not a ticketing expert, so I know that's generally your podcast, so I apologize for that. But like
Not at
there's
all.
not yeah, there's not a lot in terms of really sophisticated marketing that I've seen. I do know that a lot of our clients obsess about pricing. So a lot of yield models and a lot of calculus that goes into really trying to figure out how do you move excess inventory, where's the best distribution channel for XYZ. I think that's what they obsess about versus am I reaching the right person with a family offer versus a college night out with their buddies or a sports book. The sports books are going to be a draw. If I was to say probably there's something there, there's like bottle service and sports books and things that are starting to make their way into venues. That's a different ticket. That's a different experience. That's a different type of buyer because you do have all kinds of incentives. You can give them cash bonuses to bet with when they get there. So I think you'll see a lot of that, but a lot of people will be turned off on that offer if you hit the wrong people with the wrong message.
Right. And betting is so interesting as well. It's so prevalent in sport in Australia. What is the case in the States? And how are you seeing teams, I guess, use either betting data or use betting as a revenue stream, an additional revenue stream?
Yeah, the big trend in the states is what we call cross channel betting. So if you think about it through the lens of where the bettor is experiencing the betting, passion, one is they could go to a casino. And in our world, we call that retail betting. So we look for consumers who go to casinos. Now, we don't know that they're in the sports book, but we know that they're really big NFL fans, really big NHL fans, really big boxing fans, and they're in a casino. So we usually say there's probably a high degree of likelihood that they're doing some sort of sports betting in a retail location. Then we can look at things like DraftKings, BetMGM, ESPN Bet, FanDuel, and we can say they're definitely a sports bettor because they're on an online platform. What our data has shown is if you reach a consumer who's doing both of those things, they tend to spend more money every year. And I think that's why you see a lot of the stadiums adding sports books to their physical locations because they're trying to get the DraftKings customer, the FanDuel customer, the BetMGM customer, the Caesars customer to come to the stadium, enjoy the game in a retail environment, but also reach them on the app. And our data shows that if you can do that, those customers tend to spend roughly about $2,000 a year on that experience.
Really? So on actually betting or just on the peripheral experiences of
No,
buying
on
merch,
on bet
buying
on
whatever?
betting through the betting brands that we look for in our database. So when we're looking for BetMGM Grand, the MGM Grand in Vegas, or a regional casino like Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, you can see that these guys are actually at the retail location. Then you can see how much they're betting on FanDuel and DraftKings. So we're combining that and saying the ones that are here tend to spend $800 a year. The ones that are here tend to spend $1,000 a year. But if you can find the consumer that does both, they're a bettor that's in the top 25%, and they tend to be a cross channel bettor. Now you can start doing what you're referring to, which is what do they spend on travel? What do they spend on meals, restaurants, and other things? And yes, it usually correlates with like they're going to spend a lot more on those things as well.
Right. Okay. Um, Women's sport is such a growing sector. Last year down here in Sydney or in Australia, we had the Women's Soccer Football World Cup, and it was just absolutely enormous. But it always feels like women's sport really still has to fight for column inches and fight for attention. What are the biggest opportunities you think in that area? Do you see it as being a huge growth area?
I mean, anybody who checks out Sports Innovation Lab will know that it's our soapbox that we believe that women's sports is like a startup. And if you think about a startup, they're starting with a foundation of high growth potential and they just need to be unlocked. And what we're seeing now is because of the social pressures and because of the economic opportunity, you're seeing a lot of investors coming into this space. Now, what they have to learn, and what we really, really pound the drum hard on, is that you can't measure this stuff the same way you measure traditional media. You have to look at the whole customer. The women's sports fan tends to be a higher value fan than the general sports fan. And we've proven this in our data over and over again. They tend to spend more, they tend to be more active, they tend to do a lot of things that you want to have if you're a brand trying to reach a customer. The problem is they're not delivering that audience at scale. So what you have to do as a brand is get involved in women's sports now, because it is a startup, and you got to be in it for the long term. You don't do media buys that are like, hey, I'm just going to buy this game, or I'm just going to buy this season. You got to be in here as a foundational player, and the brands that do that will be rewarded by the customers and the partners that they establish those relationships with. In our country, Google, Ally, Michelob, they're Adobe. There's a lot of brands that have associated themselves with women's sports, and we've proven over and over again that that is rewarded by the customer behavior. We have a great case study with CarMax and the WNBA. We showed that CarMax, when they started their relationship with the WNBA, they spiked with the WNBA fans. They appreciated the brand's association with the game, and they rewarded them with their dollars.
Wow, that's super powerful information for sponsors. In terms of just attracting fans, how do you reach fans of these sports?
Look at these events that happen in Europe around women's soccer, around football. They sell out, and they sell out because there's a strong correlation with the Arsenal brand, right? This is the Arsenal women's team. This is the, Man City women's team. And it's like, they don't, at some point, they're not going to have women's in front of the team name. They're going to just know that this is a great game, that these women are super talented, that I'm going to see a phenomenal soccer match, and then I'm going to get the same atmosphere, and sometimes a better atmosphere, because you don't have the hooligans going nuts with each other. It might just be a better place to be and a better environment to watch and enjoy sports. And I think when you look at sports in the US, the college basketball game for women is through the roof right now. We have 4 or 5, maybe 10 teams in the US where when they play each other, it's unbelievable. And they're selling out. They only have 15,000 seats or 12,000 seats, but it's packed. And when people say, "Oh, it's just, moms and their daughters, or dads and their daughters," look at the camera. Look at the angles that they're showing you of the fans in the stands, and that is the furthest thing from the truth. It's just they're delivering a great product. It's in a local market. They're telling a story about who these women are, where they came from, how they got recruited, why they're so amazing, and that is starting to build fandom. And it's going to happen in the NWSL. It's going to happen in the USL Super League. It's going to happen in the WNBA. Athletes Unlimited has launched 4 different leagues in the US. There's a lot of momentum here and a lot of content to choose from.
When you look into your crystal ball and you look at 2024 and beyond, what sort of trends do you think we'll see in terms of fan behavior and in terms of the best ways to reach fans and sell tickets? And I know we've sort of spoken about a lot of this stuff already, but just in a nutshell, like if you project for the next 12 and 24 months, what sort of trends do you think we'll
Yeah,
see?
I think there's a lot of hype around artificial intelligence, AI. But I think what AI is going to do is going to be transformational for the fan experience. And the reason it's going to be transformational is consumers are going to learn that they can manipulate content in really clever ways. Every young person wants to be a sportscaster. Every young person wants to do the Monday morning quarterbacking, or they want to talk about their favorite athlete, or they want to talk trash. And the ability to use AI to create unique content, and this is going to drive the leagues crazy. Also, rights protected content that gets manipulated and outside of the barriers of like getting a cease and desist letter from the NFL. You're going to be able to create new merchandise. I think that's going to have like really cool alternate logos and colors, but also have an association with the team. You're going to be able to create new highlights that kind of are the game but aren't the game. You're going to have cartoon characters that are doing slam dunks. You've already seen this with some of the NHL stuff and the NFL stuff that they're doing with Nickelodeon and things like that. There's a whole new library of content that I think is going to be created, and I think it's going to be created by the fans. And I think that's going to create more excitement about being able to whip out your phone or stream something live and clip a highlight, or being on a game platform and doing something cool. Fans are going to demand access to this content, and the leagues aren't set up to do this, and the rights holders aren't set up to do this. They protect their content with like iron fists. And I think AI in the next 12 to 24 months is really going to challenge that power struggle and, bring up a whole new experience for fans going forward.
That's so interesting because as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, teams are going to want to monetize this.
They're
May
absolutely
not be
going to want to
possible.
monetize it, and they're going to want to shut it down, and athletes are going to want royalties, and it's going to be a really interesting and challenging time for the industry, but it's going to grow fandom, which is what you asked me, which is like, how do fans get more engaged, get more involved, buy more tickets? I think this is going to unlock a whole new way of thinking about like, why would I want to go? Like, what do I want to see? Like, why would I want to watch? And I think people are going to start streaming stuff that people are going to be like, holy cow, that's incredible.
Josh, last thing, I think you mentioned earlier on that you were a sportsman. Perhaps you still are. What was your sport of choice?
I was a very good high school baseball player, and tried to be a college baseball player. And I was a very short but very successful quarterback in football. I just couldn't see over the guys who were supposed to protect me, so we always had to have me run outside and throw the ball. I love any sport. I play old man hockey now, and I play old man soccer, and I get to play golf every once in a while with my kid. Anything that gets me out there, anything that lets me enjoy the outdoors and really get my kids excited about being active. I just love sports, and I hope that our company can continue to make the world a better place through the power of sport. We talk about that with our employees. Data is just one way of doing that. And if we can bring more intelligence, if we can make the industry smarter, hopefully more kids are active. Maybe it builds more equity in the women's sports space and diversity and racial issues and things like that. So excited to be in this space. Really happy that you had me on. I appreciate it. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Josh. It's been so great to chat with you. I really appreciate your time.